the team is about to come back and join us here, which is fantastic. They're back. Welcome back, everybody. Cam and Nicole and the crew. I will stop sharing. I will go ahead and turn all of that stuff off. There we go. And wait for it. We're rolling. We're doing everything here. And I guess with that, I will unmute Mr. Brewer. And there you are, Cam. Hello, Cam.
Hi, Mark. Great to be here. Thank you for your help once again, and good evening, everybody. My name's Cam Brewer, and I'm joining you from my home way across the province in East Vancouver on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And thank you, everyone, for giving up some of your Tuesday evening to participate in this very important part of democracy. We're choosing a new MLA for Nelson-Creson, and I'm extremely excited to be here tonight and to be able to introduce Nicole Charlwood, who moved to Nelson in 2000, about the time that I was living there. She's a mother and has been, of course, very lucky to have her family being raised and kids growing up in the amazing Kootenay. She's a foodie, like everyone kind of has to be who lives in Nelson. She's a singer and an outdoor enthusiast, which again, there's no choice in Nelson and the Kootenays about not being an outdoor enthusiast. You kind of have to be. So Nicole certainly is. She's an arts lover and an activist, and in fact, for a while was acting executive director of the West Kootenay Eco Society. So you're probably all familiar with that organization. She's also worked as a project manager in insurance, and currently now serves on the Regional District of Central Kootenay Watershed Advisory Committee. She's treasurer for the Waldorf School, for the school association there, and on the review committee member for the Columbia Basin Trust, giving out community grants that we know are so important in the Kootenays. And of course, as we all know and why we're here together tonight, Nicole is the Green Party candidate to be MLA for the Nelson-Creson riding. So Nicole, with that, welcome.
Thanks, Cam. This is such an honor to be doing this with you, and I just want to take a moment to thank you for running to be our party leader. I thought you did a great campaign, and that really invigorated us here, and I know you had a lot of support here, so thanks for that effort.
Thank you. So I'll let you maybe just with my introduction, give you an opportunity then to speak to everyone who's joining us here tonight about your vision and why it is that you want to be and should be elected as the MLA for Nelson-Creson.
Thanks. First, I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we campaign is unceded territory. And I acknowledge, respect, and honor the First Nations in whose traditional territories we live and work, and all Aboriginal people that consider this their home. So, what do you want to know, Cam? Give me your question again, because that felt important to do first.
Yeah. So out of the, I guess I'd like to know first of all, why you are. I know you are, but I want you to explain to all the rest of everyone listening why you are the best person to be elected as MLA for Nelson-Creson, and related to that, why it is that you're running for the Green Party.
So my background is quite varied, and when I look back, I can see this path to this moment. I didn't have a plan to get here, but I do reflect back to my childhood when all four of my parents were bureaucrats. They worked for the government, and so I had an early sense of the importance of government. And since then, studied economics, international trade, have been involved in finance of a lot of small business and not-for-profits. And I've lived here almost half of my life, so I really feel like I know this riding really well. I've campaigned here for a decade, and I've just had so many conversations. I really feel that combined with my ability to vote as an independent, as a Green Party member, I would be able to best represent what we need for our small rural communities at the legislature. I think that's why that's kind of a combo of your question. That's part of why I'm with the Green Party, it's definitely where my values align. So I would get to represent within my own value set and not feel in that way.
Okay. Well, and so you mentioned that you've been campaigning before across the riding, so you're familiar. You live in Nelson, but you're familiar with all the communities in the ridings.
From Weimar to Yak, Argenta, Caslow, so many small communities. I was just in Windle this weekend, and each little community has their own personality, its own sense of community and what's important. So yeah, I do feel I've spent time in all the little nooks and crannies that we call the Kootenays around Kootenay Lake.
Fantastic, fantastic. So you mentioned your background in economics and finance and international development and so on, but I'm going to step back to when you were much younger. And when you were 13, you served as a page in the Ontario legislature in Toronto. And I'm wondering, what you remember of that experience, and if there was something there that you learned that you would say is still valuable today.
So yes, I was 13 and my job was to study in the morning because I got to leave school for 2 months to do this job. So I had to study in the morning in the basement of the legislature and then put on my little uniform with 20 other pages and run upstairs and work the floor of the legislature in the afternoon, bringing little messages, because nobody had phones back then. So we were running paper messages around and running, legislative documents from offices into the chambers. So it was very exciting, lots of pomp and circumstance. So it felt otherworldly to me for sure. And one thing that really stuck was that I never really saw that as something I would do. It was frankly filled with older white men. And I came from a really diverse community of all sorts of cultures and colors, and that made more sense to me than this, pretty dull space of people I didn't really resonate with. And so to now be running to be a provincial representative as a woman, to be working towards representing more voices in the legislature, it's quite a journey from there, and I'm pretty excited about that.
Amazing connection back to a time when things were really not diverse at all. So that's great and inspiring to what you're going to be able to contribute when you are elected in Victoria. So you mentioned, of course, that your formal training in economics, finance, and international trade. And from that perspective and with that background, what role do you see the Kootenays playing in a transition to a green economy?
So a lot of the decisions provincially and even in terms of our business locally is based on trade. So, we're hauling logs out of our province because of trade. We want to build LNG pipelines and plants and haul it out of our province. And I've actually did a study back in, it was when NAFTA was negotiated, and we learned at that point that anything that was volunteer, so if you attach any, we'd really like it if you, come into our country and do some mining or something like that, that you'll do it in a good way, right? And just leaving that to it's sort of this volunteer agreement that countries don't follow through on anything that's volunteer. So it needs to be better legislated and negotiated at the beginning. And we've made some grave errors, I think, in that regard by hauling out a lot of our natural resources at really low prices. And we've built industries that are crumbling as a result, and they're going to keep crumbling. LNG, there's no market for LNG that's worth, the damage that it's doing. So my experience in that regard has taught me that, and I've come to the place where I believe localizing our economy is the way to go. So I guess, international trade was an interesting study. Even economics and how we've built the system that we've got now was interesting learning. And I was taught, GDP, there's all these externalities that aren't being included. So there would be something there too around how we are valuing people and resources. I think there's a lot of room to grow in that regard.
So it sounds like your vision then of a green economy is in fact much more. So there's social justice, the local piece, and sustainability as well over a very long term, not just green industries.
That's true. And you know, when people talk about the economy, I know they're thinking jobs. So if we're talking about localizing, let's talk about and greening the economy, let's talk about what are we doing for climate change mitigation? Why aren't we out in our forests right now cleaning out all the debris and replanting? And you know, there's all this work that needs to be done, and we can pay people to do that and get healthier communities out of it. So that's the style of economy that I'm interested. I've lived and worked in co-ops for 30 years. You know, that's a business model I know that you like too, Cam. I've heard you on your campaign talking about that, and I would go, yeah, co-ops, woo.
Okay,
So,
it's my turn then. Yeah.
yeah, I'm seeing other people wave that one on too. So yeah, that's my angle on the economy and international trade.
And you mentioned forestry in particular. I noticed that you have Herb Hammond is on your advisory council, and I'm assuming then that's the direction, the things that Herb and the Sova Forest Foundation have been talking about in terms of the forest economy.
That's right, exactly. It's where I'm getting my tips, and I'm so honored that I have advisors like Herb. So many scientists have come out of the woodwork in this election, so I feel really equipped with strong sort of visionary ideas for our local communities. And Herb really, as you know, has some really brilliant ideas, and simple, and actually it doesn't take a lot to just change our perspective. What do forests offer, and how do we look at the land? How do we connect with everything around us, because we know we're connected? And he's a good reminder of that for me, and I really appreciate his perspective.
Absolutely. So Nelson-Creson, the NDP MLA, Michelle Mungal, served as Minister of Energy, Mines and Petroleum. And she was in that role at the time when LNG Canada announced its final investment decision of the LNG export facility in Kitimat. If you had been in that role at that time, what would you have done?
I'm assuming that I would be a Green MLA and not an NDP MLA, because if I was an NDP MLA, I couldn't have done anything differently. I would not have had that power. Assuming I'm a Green MLA, I mean, my economic training has taught me to look for bad investments, and LNG is a bad investment. It doesn't have a longevity to it. It's not environmental degradation aside, it doesn't have that longevity. So I would have not done it at all. It's the simple answer.
Okay. And going forward then with the situation with the LNG infrastructure that's now in place, what would your platform be moving forward?
Given that it's there, you mean?
Yeah.
That it's already flowing and running. Well, there is some unresolved discussions, I think, along pipelines. So there's some work that could be done there to at least share the wealth if we're going to be doing it. I would like a lot more refining, right? So if we're ensuring we're refining, it's the best we can do. But what are we doing with the tankers on the water?
Yeah.
You know, like, I'd want to stop that. But then, right? So can you just go and tear it all down now? It would be a tricky negotiation to have. So I think making it clean and looking for other ways, other markets. It's all going to China right now. What are you thinking about further down the line? Are we going to do another pipeline going south? You know, is there openness to talking about a transition already with such a new facility and a new infrastructure set up?
Right.
That's what I'd be doing, just negotiating, seeing where the opportunities are. And I don't know what those are in this moment.
Okay, so then moving more local to this riding, the Nelson-Creson riding, what excites you most about representing Nelson-Creson?
I have to say that in the week of campaigning that I've done, I've been really impressed and invigorated, I think, to keep going forward with a really strong campaign because of the resilience and frankly the creativity of people in our communities who are dealing with some pretty tragic circumstances right now for many of them. And businesses are actually doing really well. I just walked Baker Street today. I was surprised. So we've got sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Could you guide me a little bit again in what you were looking for? What my question
Just
was?
about what excites you most about representing the riding.
Yeah, so I think I really thrive in group work and solving problems. I'm a bit of a change maker that way. So I like to come into situations when change is inevitable and there's resistance and that kind of thing. And I'm not really seeing a lot of resistance in our communities. There's a lot of acknowledgement that change is at hand and what do we want to do about it. And there's been a lot of work in the background already done of solutions that we can do locally. So, I'm excited to be representing businesses who are saying, okay, I can't do the same business. And I know that long-term my business has to change. So what resources are available to me to help me feel secure in being creative and adventurous and finding that new way of doing business? So that combination of an issue to be dealt with and that we're in it right now to make the changes and just working with the creativity of local people is really exciting for me.
Well, and your background is doing that, right? So your work, for example, with the West Kootenay Eco Society, when you're acting executive director, what did that entail, and how did you engage in the community in that role?
So the biggest program with the West Kootenay Eco Society is their Renewable Kootenays campaign. And I was doing a maternity leave fill-in for a year. So that's why I was there. And it was a time, even only a couple of years ago, when local governments were not acknowledging that climate change was an issue. And on top of that, energy security is another issue and vital thing that we need to deal with. And within that, there's transportation and all sorts of sectors that we haven't sorted out how to deal with. So it was pretty exciting to go to the city of Nelson, the regional district of Central Kootenay, and getting them on board with acknowledging we need to set targets for emissions reduction and getting their approval. So that was most of the work that was happening, aside from running a not-for-profit and working really hard to try to find money to keep us rolling, right? So that's just while we're talking about that's something that's really important to me, that I think the model of not-for-profits is a broken model too, and that there's so many organizations like the West Kootenay Eco Society, Nelson Cares, Anchors in Creston, so many organizations that work on a shoestring budget to help our most marginalized and under threat, both environmentally and socially, that we need sustainable funding for these types of organizations to really allow them to do the work we need in our communities.
Yeah, and the funding might be even more of a challenge with the lag time after the hit from COVID. The economy suffers, the endowments with foundations might be in worse shape. And, from your experience, though, with the Columbia Basin Trust as a review committee member, do you see a future there where there's going to be even more demand on foundations like the Columbia Basin Trust?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what times of change breed, right? Is more need for support. Yeah. And the Columbia Basin Trust is an organization that brings quite a bit of funding into our region. And their model has been sort of small distributions of smaller amounts of money. And I believe that many of those donor organizations are now looking at larger projects. So I think a lot of the sort of smaller community-based organizations are going to feel a lot more discomfort looking for their funding going forward.
For sure. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So one last question, maybe before we start opening it up to the participants tonight, and just generally, what do you think you're going to do differently compared not just the last term, but all the history of MLAs that you've seen representing Nelson-Creson since you moved here in 2000? What, just in general, what will you do differently?
Well, I alluded to it before. I will vote independently. So that's important. In most votes, there are certain budget votes and that kind of thing where we team up. But so I'll have that opportunity that others have not had before me. I will be open. It's been very difficult to engage locally with our MLA on a whole range of topics if it didn't fit within the NDP frame and what they were trying to do. It was really difficult to cut through, and I'm hearing consistently across the riding that people want to be heard more, and I can tell. I'm listening and they just really want to be heard more. So I understand that there have been reasons, technical reasons sound like maybe, you know, too many people coming with questions, so that's why we weren't able to respond to everybody, and I don't think that's good enough, especially when your job is to represent. So that's something that I would do differently. You know, going back to, you said, so policy wise, what might I do about Kitimat and all of that? Well, I would say stop propping it up, right? So if we've got, I would look at prioritizing our spending differently. Where do we want to be channeling billions of dollars? I would like it to go into communities all over the province and be given to communities to self-determine more how they're going to spend money to build up their communities. So if we're putting billions of dollars into LNG and Site C and clear-cut logging, I'd rather, and propping them up. So they're making money only because we're putting our tax dollars into them. So I would immediately want to redirect those taxes elsewhere. Of course, paying attention to transition for workers, that would be valuable. Of course. I think the other thing that I would offer is the ability to work across party lines. So I have Liberal friends, I have NDP friends, of course I have Green friends, and each new term of the legislature, especially if we can bring in a minority government situation, I'm open to crossing party lines, right, in either direction, and not sort of holding tight to Green Party policy only. So I think I can offer that. I think that's about all I have to say on that. Did you have any other questions?
No, that's excellent. Just, listening to you talk though too about the, not spending more money on things like LNG. Your background in economics and finance, of course, would allow you to make those arguments powerfully. So I look forward to seeing you do that in action. But let's move to some viewer questions, some participant questions now. But before we do, Mark, can you throw the poll up? We've got some questions that everyone can. There we go. Thanks, Mark. You can see the poll there. Please fill in your responses, and we'll circle back to that a little later on. But let's start, Mark, with Hoda has a question. If you could spotlight. Hoda's been having her hand up for a while. There we go. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Nicole, for running. I'm very proud of you and very pleased. Oftentimes, seniors do not see themselves as being part of the Green Party because we envision you only want money donations from the seniors, and many seniors cannot afford money donations. So my question is, what platform can you envision the seniors becoming active in with the Greens? And I'm not really looking for an answer tonight if you had not thought of that, but I would like for you to consider it and put it up for further discussion with people when you go to crowds, because the Green is also for us as seniors. It's also for us. But many people don't envision that because they think it's only for the young. Thank you very much for running. I'm most grateful.
Thanks, Hoda. It's nice to see your face. It's been a while.
Yeah, good to see you.
May I just reflect back? I want to be sure I heard you properly. So you're concerned that the political party is not concerned with engaging seniors in campaigning, or do you mean in between, like for elected politicians, you don't feel heard? Could you speak a little bit more about that?
Not only just for campaigning, but how can you contribute to the Green Party in an active, dignified fashion besides just giving money? Most seniors are on limited income. So we give what we can, but what do you perceive could possibly be a role for people in their 70s, 80s? Like, I'm getting there. I am in my 70s, mid 70s. So
Thanks, Hoda. And I would like to assure you that actually our campaign has people on it from every decade, starting with the teens up to 80s. So our campaign is very capable of finding something for anybody of any age who comes forward. And I would assume that when I'm MLA, that I would be able to continue that. So there's dialogue. The phone still works, people. So we have seniors right now who are making lists of people and calling their friends. That's a pretty fun job. Most of them want to be calling their friends, and that works for us, and we're really grateful for that work. Thanks for your comments, Hoda.
Yes, thank you, Hoda. That's excellent. So the next question is from Gordon McMahon, who submitted a question, Nicole, through your website. And he wrote, while the NDP would seem to promote a renewal of the forestry sector, I believe we need to change the way forestry is done in the province. I therefore am interested in understanding the Green Party position on this issue. So we touched on this a little bit already, but maybe you can expand for Gord.
Sure, thanks for your question, Gord. I know that we'd love to see us just making some better plans and truly getting back to forestry versus logging. So there's a big shift there, and how BCTS works, really the BC timber sales. So our goal right now is to haul as many logs out of the forest as we can. And I know this because I camped up on Kootenay Lake this summer and had to leave the campground with my son because for 48 hours straight, logging trucks would go by rumbling really loud through the canyon every 20 minutes. It was so frequent. It kept us up at night, and we started timing it. It was on the minute every 20 minutes. So the shift is about recognizing the values intrinsic in our forests and valuing the moisture they keep in the ground and the protection they do of our watersheds. So there's a framing change that needs to be acknowledged in our system of forestry. So a piece of that for me would be, localize the ownership of and the management of forests, maybe not the ownership, but the management of forests, because who's going to care best for the forests and the trees? The people who live with them. And so localizing our efforts in the forest, I think, would help us shift our perspective, and frankly, just banning clear-cut logging. That's the simple, quick first thing for me. And then shifting how people work in the forest. And we can actually be employing way more people in forestry than we are right now. So there's no lack of economic opportunity, but it does mean getting back to the land a little bit, finding our values and respecting the trees and the land for what it does bring and give us.
Great, yes, and absolutely about the employment piece. You certainly have the best example in British Columbia right in your backyard over at Harriet Proctor. So thank you for that. The next question will go to Keith, who put this in chat. Keith asks, how do you plan to encourage party unity, encourage diversity, and work with social movements?
So repeat that. What are the three things I want to answer there?
Sure. So Keith
Unity.
asks,
Unity.
How do you plan to encourage party unity?
Yeah.
Encourage diversity, and work with social movements?
I'm going to assume all three of those have to do with the party specifically. So party unity, I don't know that I need to do anything in that regard. I feel our party's unified. So you might want to offer more on that question. Diversity within our party, or as a woman entering into a legislative situation, I feel like I'm personally bringing diversity, but in terms of encouraging diversity, it's always about what perspective is missing, and hoping to fill those gaps as best as possible. And I think that's a big piece of that, is being open to other opinions, other parties as much as possible. I believe that's my answer to diversity. And what was the third one?
Oh, sorry, social movements.
Social movements.
Working with.
That's all I do, is work with social movements. But there's, there's youth climate organizations all over the place. Rebellion Extinction. I mean, frankly, I've worked on the edge of activism, and I keep going, activism is so important right now, and it's keeping the pressure on. So any of those movements that want to talk, I'm in. We'll show up, and we support. I hope that answers the question.
Well, it does. And, you've already touched on this a bit, because how you contrast what it was like as a 13-year-old in the Ontario legislature with a bunch of white men. And then now you're leading the way, you're showing what's possible yourself. And also with your diverse background in economics and finance with nonprofit organizations, your involvement in education can weave together all these things, I think, in a very exciting way. So the next question actually has to do with schools. So Alan asked this through Facebook. In 2022, school board elections will be held in British Columbia. If the people of the Creston Valley choose 3 school board trustees who are dedicated to the reestablishment of an independent school district, similar to one that existed before amalgamation, will you commit to working with them to help make that dream a reality?
Yes, is the short answer. I am a big proponent, and Al, thanks for the question. I know that came into me through my email, so now I get to just do it live with you, which is great. I support independent schooling, and part of the reason for that is to provide choice to families and children, and to give autonomy to communities to make education work for them. I know SD8 has this school district that we're all in here around Kootenay Lake, that they can't compete with Vancouver for funding. We know this, yet we have to follow education rules designed for the big cities, and it's really difficult to implement here, and we don't get enough funding, and it's difficult in so many ways. So I believe that who are best to care for our children and their education are their communities. And so anything that decentralizes existing system, education is just one of them. I think it's the same in most systems, but specifically in education, decentralization, I'm all for it, absolutely.
Okay, great. Now we have a question from Angela, who asks about the 4-day work week. She says, how do you feel about the 4-day work week, and how do you see it implemented? For example, staggered for the service industry, such as restaurants, hotels, etc., or Monday to Thursday, Tuesday to Friday. How could it be implemented?
Right. So my understanding from Sonia Firstenow, who launched that plank, is that it would never be mandated. So it's not like we would require businesses, for example, to only hire people for 4 days. Having said that, I do know that it's a popular idea in the Kootenays. Many of us try to maintain a 4-day work week on our own. And so having the opportunity to do that, I think is great. It's up to employers to decide how that works for them. Staggered, great. I mean, 9 to 5 is somewhat a ridiculous concept now. I think most of us know that. In some ways it's useful, but most of us don't fit into that. So I'm supportive of the concept of allowing for a really good work-life balance. I like the idea. I know people like the idea, but I'm not a proponent of forcing people to work less, only if they want. For me, I'm more interested in something like basic livable income, so that you can decide how much you want to work and look for jobs that you like. And I think the pressure would then be on businesses to be more flexible and offer us more choices in how and when we work. Some people want to work more than that. Great. I don't want to stop them from working, right? But I do like the option to be available.
Of course. Okay. Well, and certainly, from my experience in the Kootenays, in the wintertime, the fifth day has to be the day when there's lots of snow, right?
That's right. So it needs to be flexible.
It needs to be flexible. Okay, we have a question from James from the Creston's Farmers Market, who wondered about your stance on agricultural subsidies.
On agricultural subsidies, I am all for supporting agriculture. Interestingly enough, at the Creston Farmers Market, I had a conversation with a farmer who reminded me that farmers actually like that livable income idea too, because you don't know if you're going to have a good year or not on the farm. But if we have farmers who feel secure in their income, we're going to have more farmers, and it won't be such a rough ride for them, and it might actually be an interesting and happier vocation to pick. But right now they're struggling. So in terms of subsidies and that kind of thing, it depends on what the situation is for farmers. It sounds like there's plenty of land out there to be purchased, but do they need help purchasing land? I think that's worth investing in. In Creston, farmers are seriously concerned about water, like we are all over. With this enormous lake in the middle of our riding, we're worried about water. It's true, it's crazy. So farmers are unable to get the volume of water they want. And so I could see saying, okay, if our farmers in Creston are concerned about having enough water to grow their crops, and it keeps us from expanding into more and more crops, then I would say let's invest in supporting water capture and technologies and infrastructure to support farmers in that regard.
Great. Okay. Now that idea, the guaranteed minimum income applying to farmers isn't what one normally thinks about, but you're quite right. That's a real exciting opportunity. And in fact, in every industry, to encourage people to take the risk, to entrepreneurs to be supported and so on. So yeah, it's great points. So Susan asks, and these are great questions too. I would like to hear if you support a green bank and a ministry of cooperatives. I can guess your answer to that. I believe this is the best method for Greens to mass buy electric vehicles or retrofit homes, and also launch green initiatives like thermal sewage that capture the heat and provide that heating for neighborhoods.
Green Bank. I heard of that idea recently and I really liked it. I hadn't thought of it. And so given my background, I'm super interested in that idea. And, I have some ideas of where we might get that money to start that bank. So investment in green technologies and infrastructure, retrofitting alone. I mean, the amount of work, I think I just read that it will take us at least 2 years to train everybody to even start the retrofitting initiatives that we really need to do in our communities. That's one of the biggest employment opportunities that exists. So essentially a bank could rechannel those billions of dollars I was talking about earlier. There's the money in your bank, and there are some really good parameters around which money can be used from that pool that I think it's a great idea. And yes, co-ops. I went to the University of Waterloo. The reason I chose to go to the University of Waterloo, because it's a co-op. I could work for a term, make money, then pay for my next term of school, and then work for a term. So it took me a little longer to get my degree, but I also got 2 years of work experience out of it. So the co-op model, Herrick Proctor Forest co-op model, Kootenay Co-op, we've got one of the best co-ops or biggest food co-ops in North America in our small town of Nelson. So co-ops to me are one of the best models, and within co-ops there's lots of alternatives that work for different styles of initiatives. And there's also the B Corps that Green Party just set up, which is also interesting. So organizations that want to focus on social and environmental improvements, I guess you could say, is also an interesting model.
And all those things then fit nicely together. So you have the Green Bank funding B Corps, funding co-ops, incorporating the right kind of training that's necessary for the green work that next gets to be done. So yeah, excellent.
And then you're incentivizing, right? All the businesses that aren't doing what we want them to be doing, it incentivizes them to make a shift.
Right. So before I ask the next question, I'm just going to remind everybody that if you haven't answered the poll, if you haven't filled in your responses, please do that now. We've got another 15 minutes left, and we'd love to see your thoughts. The next question then comes from Green Guy, who asks, Indigenous land claims in BC seem to be accelerating. What is your position on the idea of brokering treaties and settlements with BC First Nations?
So the idea of brokering, I don't understand what that means. Maybe Cam, do you have some suggestions on what that might mean?
Probably the role of the province, I guess,
Okay, right.
in negotiating and implementing treaties and settlements.
Right. So as a settler, in settler politics, it's a bit of it's a difficult question for me to answer, in that I'm not sure the province is the right person or the right entity to broker those deals. So there's that concern. Yeah, I don't have an opinion on it. I do know that there is, currently in our riding, there's a case at the Supreme Court right now around a certain nation south of the border, and can we recognize them north of the border? And there's a treaty negotiation currently happening for another nation in the east part of our riding. So I don't really feel comfortable articulating what my or a settler group might play in that role right now.
Okay, no problem. Let's switch gears then away from that and the complex issue then of indigenous rights and title, and move to housing. So this is a question from Marlene, who asks, the need for supported housing is acute in our community, and persons with disabilities, cognitive impairments, and severe mental health challenges have been abandoned. What would you do to improve this situation locally, given these services were long ago stripped away by the Liberals?
Mm-hmm. So there's so many services that have been weakened in our communities, for sure. And I do think assisted living is something that keeps coming up, that I'm hearing about. There are many people in our community who could use extra support, and going to offices, but then having to go home and sort of bouncing around. That some assisted living in a big way is really needed. We've done a lot of low-income housing, but that doesn't talk about all the other supports that are needed. So having some integrated approaches in our communities to address the intersection of a lot of these issues is important. And to me, it's money. Again, it comes down to, we have organizations running on a shoestring, begging for money on an annual basis to support these issues, and it's not working.
Well, and the co-op ideas you have too can fit in here, just in part of the entire spectrum of housing opportunities, and it's not necessarily the ones identified in that question. Although housing for people with disabilities could certainly be co-ops. Wouldn't that be right too?
Why not, right? And looking at who the community is that's using and activating the co-op, and they get to decide for themselves what they need and how to move forward. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So a question now, Nicole, from David in Nelson, who wants to know, how will you support local small businesses?
Well, all small business, the confidence to be creative and innovative right now is important. Bridging gaps in training. So many small businesses right now need to find new ways to do things. Are we supporting them and getting the training and the information, help them with that decision making? Are they a green business? Do they want to borrow some money from our green bank? Yeah, to me, small businesses are doing quite well. It's about whether they can maintain the employment levels that they had before. So supporting businesses in employing people or not employing them is also very relevant. Those are some of my ideas. Yeah.
Okay. Now, another question from from Riley, who's also in Nelson, who wants to know how are you different from other politicians in other parties? Now you've touched on this a little bit already, but maybe just you can explain again why you're different than the NDP and the Liberal options in this election.
Sure. So again, I'll say that what makes any Green Party MLA different is we get more autonomy and the opportunity to act as an independent to represent our constituents first before the party. So that would be the main differentiator in terms of the politics. I think that I offer, in terms of the candidates in this riding, a longer history of experience and a wider range of experience with strong economic and change maker background. So that's how I distinguish myself with the local candidates.
Okay. Now here's a question that's I know top of mind in the Kootenays, and this has to do with watersheds. And what would you do in order to ensure that drinking water is protected?
Stop clear-cut logging in our watersheds. That would be the first step. We need to implement better land use around water and preserve our water. And we need to be measuring it, and we need to be testing it all the time and understanding it. We need to be spending time with our water. That's high level, my perspective in that regard.
Okay. Well, certainly, as you know, we've talked about, there's great examples in the Kootenays on how to do this properly, and you'll just continue with the success stories with Harrop Proctor and other communities and ecosystem-based, nature-based planning.
And keep sharing our learnings. We've got lots of them. We have no question about what. It's just about getting people doing it, right?
Okay. Okay, great. Well, Mark, maybe it's time now we can put up the results from the poll. There we go. Great. And as we're looking at the results there, if anyone has any other last minute questions, just pop them into the chat and we can go to those now. But there are the results from the poll tonight.
I think from the results here, we can say confidently that Nicole's going to win hands down. If we did a 100% voting for you.
Well, we're going to have to
pay all these people to just come in here and chat with me.
Okay.
Yeah, interesting. I love to see that 57% right off the top. That's how I'm feeling too. There's a lot of opportunities right now, and I'm motivated by that too.
Okay. Well, given that your landslide victory that's upcoming, Nicole, I'm going to ask you this question anyway. Yael wants to know, have you thought about how to represent NDPers, loggers, and Liberals and find out a way to give them what they need so they'd vote for you too? So a slight twist on what makes you a little bit different, but what it is that you think you'll be doing to make NDP voters and Liberal voters and loggers, whoever they might vote for, to because there could be a range, have this group of people vote for you.
Thanks, Yael, for the question. I am talking to a lot of NDP, a lot. So I don't need to do a whole lot to convince them to vote for me. It's about being open to their concerns, regardless of the party. Frankly, I don't have, it's not a strategy to bring over one party or the other. But I would say that because of our policies and because of who I am, there are opportunities to connect with everybody. We all have commonality. Doesn't matter who we are, what party we're from, what our industry is. But I think being open to hearing what people's fears are is a big piece of that bringing in of other voices into a green vote.
Great. Okay. So we're getting close to the top of the hour, and what I'll do now is just thank Mark for taking care of things in the back room, as it were, and thank everybody for participating tonight in this really informative discussion, and turn it over to you, Nicole, to offer some some final thoughts in the evening.
Thanks. This has been great. I'm going to actually switch to the gallery view so I can see everybody here. I don't even really have a sense. Wow. Okay, I'm writing all your names down. Oh, hi, everybody. We'll be calling you. Make sure you get out and vote. Thanks, everyone, for your time and coming to listen. I look forward to, I'm sure I'll get some feedback. Being a politician, there's lots of feedback coming in. So please don't hesitate to be in touch with me if you've got some thoughts. I really do want to express that this is a different election in this riding. There is a lot of recognition that the business as usual approach that we've been taking is not serving our small rural communities. And so the best opportunity we have to make a difference in that regard is to vote in a green MLA. And I'm honored to be that opportunity for you. I mean, minority governments, we haven't talked about that tonight, but to me, that's what this is all about. We had a stable and effective government. Everybody chooses to vote despite that, and that we're all reaching out to the people we know to vote. I don't care what party, just get out and vote right now. We don't want to lose the numbers. And I would like to remind everybody that there are a whole bunch of people who have just become of age to even vote. And this is their first election, and they aren't registered to vote. They don't even really know the process, a lot of them. But as soon as I talk to them and say, hey, this is your first election, that's pretty exciting. Yeah, but I don't know what to do. So I really encourage everybody, if you know youth in our community, please talk to them and ask them if they know what to do for voting. If they don't, I'm following up with 5 of them tonight after I get off with you to say, hey, this is how you get registered and this is how you vote. And I'm really so excited for you to have this opportunity. This is democracy in action, and we need to raise that youth vote up from the normal 25%. Beyond that, you know, as a Green Party person, I care about the climate, and that is one of my main motivators to be throwing myself in this way. My family is behind me 100% and a constant reminder to me of why I'm going to do this work. And I'm really honored to have this opportunity. So thanks so much.
Good. Well, thank you. And Nicole, just so that everyone who's now inspired wants to help out, they can make donations through your website. They can volunteer. How? By through the website? Is that the best way?
NicoleCharlwood.ca. And you can see my name right there under my face. .ca.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody, and thanks Nicole.
Thank you so much, Cam and Mark. I really appreciate the support. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Hi, Caslow. Sheila, woo. Hey, Rob. Thank you. Good to see you. Inga, hi. Thanks for coming. Hi, yo.
Hey.
Oh, hi, sweet pea. Thanks for coming in and listening. Who has the music going? Is that you?
That's me.
Careful, I might start singing. No. Yeah, I would.
I ended up on Natalie's computer. Good work, Nicole.
Okay, bye. Hey, thanks, Devin.
No worries. We'll see you soon.
Okay, sounds good. Oh, wow, lots of them in the chat. Hopefully that gets captured.
Yeah, we've recorded tonight, and I will forward also the chat along.